So what I'm going to talk about is a thing called ObfusKit or ObfusKit. Yeah, you know me. So I also thought about calling it not for not another wrapping technology, because do we really need another one? And the answer, unfortunately, is yes. What I ran into with my Editomat program is I started out with cookit because I was going to do obfuscation, security through obscurity. And Wojciech is not doing as much tickle anymore, so he's not maintaining the package. And it wasn't easy to build again. Trying to build starkits, the tool chain tends to be rather important. And I could build sometimes on Linux, sometimes on Windows, sometimes not at all. Mac was amusing. And when it comes down to it, our wrapping technologies were not designed for wrapping. There were database packages that got reused or archiving packages got used. And they just really aren't able to meet the needs for shrink wrap software. Because for shrink wrap software, with SDX or with a zip, you can expose the source code again. Not so good, because the most clever algorithm you ever come up with that is just utterly bizarre and nobody would ever think of it is trivial as soon as somebody can see the code. There's no support for signing the code. You can't sign a starkit, or at least last time I found anything online, you couldn't. There's not a facility for doing a self-upgrade, which is just standard nowadays and everything. And zip files in particular won't consolidate space if you do some sort of a delete and change. So after flailing around with starkits and cookit and trying something with replacing metakit with SQLite and a couple of other things, I finally decided that the problem was that we don't need all of the stuff that is inside of the current wrapping techniques. So I came up with a thing called SimpleFS, because it was designed just for wrapping. It's written in Tickle, so you don't have any problems with a different tool chain, a different version of GCC, a missing library. It's a disk-based file system. It can create a file, it can read a file, it can delete a file, and it can consolidate the space after it's deleted things. It doesn't have users, it doesn't have file types or access times. It doesn't even really have a hierarchical system, because basically a name is a name. It's really based on an old deck tape file system I wrote back in the 80s. So once I had the SimpleFS working, it was pretty easy to add a main that would mount itself as a SimpleFS, initialize in Tickle and TK, and not have all of the external packages that you have to work with for starkits and cookfs and things like that. The only two things on the left are Tickle VFS and Memchan. I took the main from starkits and tweaked it until it died and rolled over. So that got me something that would work, but it doesn't solve the problem of I need to distribute a package commercially, and I don't want people to open it up and take my hard work away and use it for something else. So ObfusKit adds two new user-provided functions, obsShrink and obsExpand. And what they do is they take your plain text, convert it into an encrypted format, or expand it back out. By default, all that's there is just a libzip that just compresses the data. Because as a general rule, compressing data is the first step to encryption. If you then want to add more encryption, there's just a little tag inside there where you say add encryption here. And you can add your own custom encryption for your application. So if you want to use DES or AES, or you want to use something that you've invented yourself, go right ahead. And now you've got encryption that is strong encryption for all of your Tickle code. Not just the Tickle codes get encrypted, but also the directory structure. So now nobody can go through and take a look at your application and say, okay, so he's got a read file and a process file and everything else, and determine what your code is based on the names of your file names. It supports the code signing. So in order to code sign, you have to be able to put a thing at the end of your executable. That's where starkits put a marker. What I did for ObfusKit is that if it can't find its own marker, it looks back the number of space that an encryption signing certificate takes and looks to see if its marker is there. The executable can update itself. It's kind of clever, and it actually works on every platform I've tried it on. So the executable copies itself to a news file, gives it a new name, modifies that, then it deletes the file that is running and renames the news file to the original name and exits. So current status, it seems to be working. I'm distributing Editomat as an ObfusKit now. I've written reworked a bunch of my internal utilities to run with ObfusKit. Runs on Linux 32, 64, Mac OS X, Windows 7, 9, 10, whatever it is they've got. Downside, it's not one-for-one compatible with a starkit. I used a different name for the mount point. I changed the structure for the libraries to make things a little bit simpler. And because I'm looking at it from always wanting to distribute a TK application, I always include that. It's always got the batteries included. Another trick is that there's a BLD application that's the equivalent of SDX, and you have to rebuild that for every encryption technique you're going to use in ObfusKit. So if you've got 4 different obfuscation encryptions, you'll have to have 4 different BLDs. Things that I learned in the process of this, Memchan can be really slow. When you're relying on Memchan to do your VFS, you can time applications with a calendar. The trick is that when you open a file for reading, it gets all read into memory because that's the way that Memchan does that, so it can then do seeks. But for some things like loading a package, loading a library, we're never going to need a seek. So the trick is to use your native, whatever your native, under the VFS, under Tickled VFS, whatever your native read and write is, use those for your sources and loads. And then you get back the speed that you lost. Can't understand why this ran so slow. Availability, 1.0 is out now. It's sitting on my New Corp site. You can download it. It might even build for you. And maybe not. So if there are any questions, I think they're going to have to go in the Q&A window. Okay. How do I handle key cert management? I'm using OpenSSL, or let's see. There, I use the OSSL signed code to put the key into the certificate into the package. And I bought a key from one of the commercial distributors. Does that answer the question? There we go. The newcorp.com, and it's right at the top. Distributed as a zip file of source with a bunch of different READMEs. Okay. Then I'm going to turn off my share because the chat window went away when I opened up the share. Yes, the comment about the encryption has to be, the decryptor has to be included. Yep, that's an issue, but that's done in the C code. So it's small, it's compiled. Somebody who's really going to be serious will go through and decode your the assembler bytecode, but that's a little bit harder than just going through and doing an SDX unpack. Yeah, actually, from the question was asked, does it work on Windows? Yeah, surprisingly, I've tested it on Win 7 and Win 10. I didn't test it on Win 8. Oh, and Win 9. Sorry, Win 9 is what I've been using for my testing. Ooh, I don't remember whether I was testing on Pro or Home at that time. I have Windows virtual machines that I do my testing in, and a bunch of things. Yeah, right. There is no Win 9. Wait a second. Yeah, so it's Windows 7 that I've been using in Windows 8 and 10. And yeah, I've gone through and disassembled code and tracked things down before. Just why I don't do it anymore, just like Donald said. Yes, if you just make the SimpleKit, it is non-encrypted. Or if you just take the obfuscated, the obsExpand and obscontract and take out the calls to the zip file, then it's an unencrypted thing. Yeah. Yeah, Windows 7, and I don't think I'm actually testing with Vista. I didn't bother to build up one of those. Any other questions? Oh, oops. Yeah. The next road next to my road is a road called Vista. And I tell people when they're coming to my house, you see Vista and don't even slow down. In my case, Editomat is being used by writers, and writers are cheap, mostly broke. So they're still using old Windows 7 systems because they can buy them at a thrift store. Okay. Any other questions? What is info body secret proc? Okay, one of the things that I do is I turn off send and the various ways that you can get into a program from the outside inside of my applications, my shrink wrap applications. So the only way you'd be able to get new code into an obfuscated obfuscate program would be to break the encryption and mung it in that way, or have the BLD application yourself that knows how to rework it. No, I haven't tried. I do all of my debugging inside of just Wish, and I don't wrap things until I'm ready to distribute them. Yeah. The obfuscate, okay, answering Holger. The obfuscate, very much like starkits, an obfuscate is just the kit. The BLD takes the obfuscate and makes that into a main that will call the TCL code that runs things. It is very much copied like a starkit.